start, I think, Mark, you were the first out of all of us to be sports director. I figured we'd go like one at a time and just say like when you were at WCBI and what do you do right now?
Okay. Yeah, my name is Mark Rogers, and I came to WCBI in the fall of 1994. I left in 2000. I have been at ESPN for the last 19 years. I'm a studio operations manager at ESPN.
Very cool. I think Chris, was it Chris after Mark? I think that
Yeah, that's right.
Together for quite a long time.
Hey, Will, good to see your face, man. I hadn't seen you in a long time.
Oh, wow, Chris. How you doing, partner?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I see you call an Ole Miss game sometimes, but I can't break through the velvet rope to get to you. So I'm glad I'm talking to you today.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for watching. I have a lot of fun doing those games.
My name's Chris Latimer, and I went to WCBI in 1995 and was the weekend anchor with Mark up through 2001. And then when Mark left, I was sports director in the back half of 2000 and in 2001.
Cool. I think it was the succession went Mark, then Chris, then Will for sports director. I think you guys were 3 straight.
Yes, I came in right after Chris left, and so I came on board right there at the start of the football season in 2001. Was there into 2004, left during the football season of 2004. It took me a long time to be a dad. Everyone always asks, well, why did you get out of TV? Well, I was 42, became a dad for the first time, and so that's why I left, to get out. Nothing. I enjoyed, obviously, my time at WCBI, and but I just didn't want to. You talk to all those sportscasters around the country, and you talk to the different coaches, and they wish they would have done things a little differently with the kids, and I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity with my son.
Yeah. Derek, I think you're the next.
Yeah, I'm, let's see, I started at WCBI in December of 2006, and then left in 2011. I think it was sports director from 08 to 11. Stayed in Mississippi for another 8 years, and then finally moved to Florida last May, and I'm director of video production for Orlando City in MLS.
The Lions.
Yeah. Right.
Robbie.
All right.
I know Robbie well, so.
Yes, I'm still one of the few that actually gets stopped in Walmart where people actually still know who I am for some strange reason. I don't know why that is.
That'll happen for another 4 or 5 years.
And I go to the Columbus Walmart, and it happens more often than the Starkville Walmart. So I try to stay away from the Columbus Walmart because everyone knows who all the WCBI people are there. But getting off track here. I am Robbie Donahoe. I started at WCBI in July of 2011, took over for Mark Dondero as the sports director in 2013, and stayed there for another 5 years. So I think I was there for 7 years in all, from 2011 to 2018. I am now a teacher and I guess you could call sports information director at Louisville High School, just down the road from Starkville in good old Louisville, Mississippi.
So obviously I'm Tom Ebel. I followed Robbie as sports director in 2018. I've been at WCBI since 2015. I've done everything except for the weather there. I was a news reporter, sports editor, and then got promoted to sports director after Robbie left. So we all kind of had this weird succession of all of us following one another, working with each other. So I thought this was a pretty cool thing. But kind of jumping right into it, we'll start with Mark. Just at your time at WCBI, obviously, like with everything going on, sports obviously canceled right now due to everything that's going on in the world. But what was your favorite story to cover while at WCBI? If there was one certain, I don't know if it's just like a major event, like, for instance, like an NCAA tournament, or like if there was a story you'll always remember doing that ended up being your favorite.
So I'll give it a little context in regards to, I grew up in Ohio. I'm from the Midwest, grew up in Ohio. So boom, I get the job at WCBI, and I'm planted in the middle of Mississippi, and the culture shock was certainly there to a certain extent. So I certainly had followed SEC football and basketball. The baseball environment, the baseball vibe, the baseball importance from the college standpoint certainly took me off guard because I hadn't been experienced to that. I was used to Major League Baseball, professional sports. So from from the standpoint of the magnitude of an event, from a sports standpoint, I would say that the NCAA tournament with Mississippi State making it all the way to the Final Four in '96 was what certainly a lot of people, even outside of Mississippi, and as I meet people all across the country, can relate to. But I think I was always intrigued by the different sports seasons. They all had a different feel and vibe to them. The baseball season versus football and basketball, and being a very traditional sports guy, those are the three that stand out to me. But the rivalry between Ole Miss and Mississippi State, covering all the sports, but football being king, I think stood out to me more than anything. It was something that people talked about all year. And I was familiar with the rivalry from a distance, but then being right in the middle of it, and Mississippi State being so down in football for so long, and Jackie Sherrill brought them back to respectability. And then Ole Miss was on probation when I arrived, and so they were a bit downtrodden. And to see Tommy Tuberville kind of lift that program and lift the spirits of the Ole Miss fan base, and it's still a Thanksgiving Day game or Thanksgiving night game, and to be there at the time in which it was moved from a Saturday afternoon game to Thanksgiving night, where all of College Football Nation could watch it, and it kind of gained that added special attention at that point. I thought it was pretty special, and there were some great games during that time. I think the one that stands out to me was I was standing in the back of the end zone, and as you asked this question yesterday, Tom, this came to mind in a few different ways. I was standing in that same end zone when Peyton Manning threw his first touchdown pass. It was like my third week at WCBI, and Peyton Manning threw his first touchdown pass as a college football player. But Mississippi State came back and won that game. And I was standing in that same end zone when I think it was Derek Tate threw the touchdown pass to a tight end. Was right in front of me in that end zone. It was my first game at Mississippi State in Scott Field. And then a few years later, Chris could help me out on the quarterback. I think it was Stuart Patridge, if I get that right, for Ole Miss, threw a game-winning touchdown. And then a two-point conversion to beat Mississippi State. And Tommy Tuberville was so fired up. He and Jackie Sherrill met at midfield, and Tuberville just kind of gave him a slap across the wrist. And, I shouted something and took off. And just the rivalry between the two schools in all sports, but obviously in football, stands out to me.
And Chris, I know you helped us out with the boys from state with the Final Four as well for the WCBI special. But where would those moments rank? Which one was your favorite story? Like one that you'll tell the kids about, you'll remember until the day you die, one of those things.
Yeah, it was that run that they made in the Final Four, and that's the easy one, and that's the obvious answer, but that's the truth. And in fact, somebody emailed me just yesterday saying that in their coronavirus self-quarantine, they had watched those boys from state, and that was good viewing for a COVID-19 lockdown. So people are still watching that right now, and WCBI did a great job with that. But I think people forget they beat Santa Clara, and Santa Clara had Steve Nash at the time. Then they beat Utah, and Utah had Keith Van Horn. And then the next year they make that run to the Final Four, and they take down Ray Allen in the Sweet 16, beat Kentucky, which everybody thought was the number one team in the country and was going to run away with it in the SEC tournament. And then when they beat Cincinnati in the Elite Eight, I know Mark went to that game. I was holding down the fort. But when everybody got back to the GTR airport, the line was out to the highway, and you couldn't get in there. Wall-to-wall people, layers of people on chairs, people on sofas standing waiting for this team to come in. So I really remember that moment when the Bulldogs came back from beating Cincinnati. They were Final Four bound. We were live at the GTR airport, and that was one of my favorite shows.
Derek, I know you spent some time with Hail State Productions, so you had some crazy experiences and things that me and Robbie can probably attest to would probably be some of our most insane moments at WCBI. But what's maybe one thing that stood out to you during your time?
At CBI, for some reason or somehow I convinced the station to let me go to Pasadena to cover the Alabama-Texas BCS championship game in '09. You know, I didn't quite know that that was going to be at the start of the dynasty that just about everybody wants to end now. But it was really cool, one, being in the Rose Bowl. But two, just being around the Alabama fans who had been waiting for 17 years to win a national championship. You know, it was a little bit easier to deal with them when it had been almost 2 decades since they won a national championship. So they were actually kind of fun to be around back then. But it was really cool being in that setting and being in the middle of it when they won their first. And then, you know, for Mississippi State, when I was there, going to the College World Series in 2007, and then their miracle run to the NCAA tournament in 2009. I mean, that team had to win 4 games in 4 days to get to the tournament, and they got blown out by Washington in the first round. But, you know, winning that tournament in Tampa when that team was nowhere near good enough to do that, that was a lot of fun covering that.
If Colt McCoy doesn't get hurt, does Alabama win that game?
No.
I'll go to I will sit on that hill until the day I die.
They were, I mean, granted, it had only been a couple of possessions. Texas just seemed like they were in control. They seemed like everything would have gone their way. In fact, I think Nick Saban kind of panicked on I think it was a 4th down. He went for it like on his own 30. That's a very not Nick Saban thing to do, which I think led to the possession where Colt McCoy gets injured. I don't think Alabama wins that game if he goes out.
Will, we talked a little bit yesterday about when you became sports director in 2001. Obviously, you know, what had happened in 2001, 9/11, you know, what was maybe, you know, during that time, I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, I mean, to an extent of what we're dealing with in the sports world right now, where everything stopped for an extended period of time. You know, during that time, what was maybe a story that you remember from that time that might have been a way for you to, you know, make you happy, you know, get through what was going on in the world?
Well, I'll tell you what, you're right. And that was my first month. I had just taken the WCBI job. And so I'm just starting out, and I still lived up here in Tupelo. So I was driving back and forth every day. John Turner, the news director, then called me one day. I was on my way down and said, hey, you might want to just hang out in Tupelo, help us with news, because we're not going to have sports for a while. And so we talked about the whole 9/11 deal. And so, I worked with Terry Abernathy a lot out of the Tupelo News Bureau, did a lot of different news stories. And it does kind of remind me of what, you know, I kind of feel for you, Tom, and all the other sportscasters that I know around the country right now, because these are very uneasy times, and you don't know when you're going to do your next sportscast. That's why I thought this was such a great idea when we were talking on the phone yesterday, to get all of us together and start flapping some gums and talk about something different than what's been on everybody's mind these last couple of weeks. So, you get at times where you have, I mean, we've had ice storms before here in North Mississippi, so that kind of will throw you off a little bit. And so you got to try to get creative sometimes. And then other times you just got to do whatever. If you need to be helped, like you said, you need to do something in news, do whatever to try to help out the team. But that was quite an interesting start to my time there at WCBI. It was right in my first month with 9/11. But of course, that only lasted a couple of weeks. We don't know how long this one's going to last for you, Tom, and all the other sportscasters around the country.
Do you have a story that you remember off the top of your head that, you know, something that you'll always remember?
Well, you know, there's so many different things that, you know, you're blessed with the opportunity. You heard Derek and Chris and Mark all talk about the fact that we get to cover at WCBI 3 SEC teams. And so it was neat covering Eli Manning's final 3 years at Ole Miss. It's pretty cool to be a part of history when Sylvester Croom gets the Mississippi State head football coaching job. But I've got to echo what Mark was talking about earlier, the rivalry. I mean, I was born and raised in Madison, Wisconsin, so I'm a huge Badger fan. You know, we talked about Wisconsin, Minnesota, the longest rivalry in the country. but there is nothing in the world that can compete with this rivalry between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. And I just remember those times where, you know, I don't know how you guys deal with it now with social media. I mean, I got stuff thrown at me at both places. I mean, people are, I go to Ole Miss and I have to hear, well, Mississippi State must be off today. That's why you're up here. Or vice versa when I'm at the other place. And so the rivalry, I always like electric atmospheres, you know, those Friday nights of high school football. And with those rivalry games with State and Ole Miss, those are the ones that really stand out.
Robbie, I'm going to take a guess here. If your two favorite moments were probably either the 2014 football season and then Morgan William, which one, if those were the shot, you know, which one are those the two that you would think of, or is there another one that sticks out in your mind?
I would throw in the 2013 College World Series team as well, because that team made that run through their regional where they had to get by Central Arkansas, then they had to beat Virginia on the road. I mean, and Hunter Renfro caught fire. That was Kendall Graveman, Adam Frazier, Wes Ray. I mean, that team was stacked. So that I still actually – on my desk right here, I actually have a baseball from that 2013 College World Series that I always hold on to because it means a lot to me. That was one of my first big events I got to cover. But I tell people all the time that I really covered sports at WCBI and kind of the golden age between Mississippi State and Ole Miss because, you know, Ole Miss went to a College World Series. State went to 2 when I was there. Obviously, we had the NCAA tournaments with Morgan William and making it to the Final Four. High school football was insane in our area between West Point, Starkville, Louisville, Tupelo. I mean, all the schools around our area. I mean, there's really – I think Mark mentioned it, you know, the different seasons between baseball, football, and basketball. All those seasons kind of blended together because all of our teams kept winning. So we never had any time off. So when basketball season ended, we went right into baseball. And when College World Series ended, we went right into covering high school football. When football ended, basketball season was already underway. So that was the most difficult part about, you know, covering sports during that time. It was the best and worst part. Was the best because you always had something to talk about, but the worst because you never had any time off. But I'd probably say, you know, Morgan Williams' shot against UConn to win that game was arguably probably one of the most defining moments in sports history for not just Mississippi State, but the state of Mississippi as a whole, because I don't think people fully realize, you know, the magnitude. And obviously Derek can speak to this as well because he was there on the floor shooting that shot because we're the local TV guys and we couldn't be on the floor. But actually getting to be in the arena for that shot and ending UConn's 111-game win streak where they'd win to multiple national championships. I mean, we'll never see anything like that ever again, more than likely in basketball, because the last time we had seen that was UCLA with Lou Alcindor and Bill Walton's teams back in the 60s and 70s. So because there's so much more parity in college basketball, I think that's what made that shot so much more significant in the history, the sports landscape history, not just in all the country, but in Mississippi for sure.
If I can add to it, I'm not sure if it was the same way when all of us were sports directors, but for moment-wise, it would probably be the Morgan Williams shot, because I just remember like our entire news staff was crammed in our little sports cave in the back, and we had on the little recording computer on the side that's like basically the size of cell phones now. And so we're all sitting there watching this thing, and everyone goes, there's, you know, when they go into overtime, it almost felt like they won. It was like, hey, we went to overtime against UConn. Sweet. Who knows what's going to happen in there? And then obviously the shot happens. The whole place erupts. The entire station goes absolutely wild because it was, you know, it was insanity. And then going back and covering when they came back home, like people with the 111-1 signs and things like that, just the whole mantra around that was insane. But for me, it would probably be this past Egg Bowl. Just the insanity of what happened in that Egg Bowl and everything that came after that. You know, the entire state of Mississippi football completely changed because of what Elijah Moore did. And it, like a missed extra point, and 2 coaches got fired, and Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach are here. It's just like the entire gravity behind everything changing because of that one missed extra point. That's one of those things that, you know, depending on what happens with Mike Leach and Lane Kiffin here, you could see that as like a defining moment of what happened